Welcome to another episode of Space Together with Justin Knapp and our special guests, where you can learn how space sharing can enable you to generate a non-traditional income stream while making an impact.
All right, guys, thank you so much for joining us. I have Howard here with us, and I could not be more excited to dive into our second conversation with the Covenant and the folks that are kind of in charge leading there. And so, Howard, thank you so much for being with us here today and taking some time to do this interview. I really appreciate your time, my friend.
Thanks, Justin. Glad to be with you.
Absolutely. Well, we won't waste any time. We'll go ahead and start off. I know you're a super busy guy, and so we'll just kind of dive in. So first thing, I would love for you to just tell us who you are and what your title with the Covenant is.
Yeah, I'm Howard Burgoyne, and my title is Superintendent. I serve in the East Coast Conference, so I try to cover everything that God is doing in the Covenant between Virginia and the Canada border, 12 states and the District of Columbia. Never a dull day, but often an overwhelming one.
Man, that is awesome. And I got to say too, man, the being the guy kind of over DC has got to be pretty busy, man. I mean, I know that at SpaceTogether anyways, we have always seen that as just such a crazy busy hub for activity.
There is, yeah.
Absolutely.
Like New York, like Baltimore, like Philadelphia,
yeah.
Like Boston. Take your pick. Yeah.
Yeah, man, you've got them all. You've got it all going on. That's awesome. And so tell me a little bit more about what you do in your role as a superintendent. What does that really entail? Like, what are you doing in that conference?
Yeah, so a number of things. I am the pastor across the whole region, kind of the first responder to situations that seem to call for somebody outside with a pastoral heart and can help direct traffic. I have an apostolic responsibility to help churches get planted and growing and out of difficulty, out of stuck situations, whatever you might want to call it. There certainly should be a prophetic educationally to rattle the cage, an evangelist's heart, an administrator's responsibility. I work on institutional and congregational and personal levels. So it's kind of a crazy, all things in perspective with a bit of a financial, got to make the numbers work too point of view. So take your pick and jump into the pool.
Man, that's so much. I think, the more and more, and of course, I pastored for 14 years. I planted 2 churches. We merged with the church. We absorbed a church. So I feel like I've gotten a pretty good glimpse of sort of like a lot of the different, borders around, ministry and what all that entails. Every time I talk to you guys, it is like, I have no idea of all the things that go in and out of all of these churches, man. It is absolutely insane what you guys do. So first of all, that is a huge job. Glad you're doing it. Tell me a little bit about the mission that you and your team are focused on right now. Like this year, the East Coast Conference, what are you and your team focused on? Now, I don't know that it's any different. Is there anything, this year that you guys have said, this is kind of what we're focused on?
Oh, absolutely. We're just emerging from a 3-year period where we officially suspended our strategic plan because we knew the conditions in the pandemic didn't allow us to do what we've been doing. I've been here for 17 years. So 14 of them, it was full speed ahead. The last 3, it's been step back and wait for clarity to come. Just last week, our team was on a 2.5-day prayerful retreat to get back into this space of, are we in a place as we look into the second half of this year and the next few years to come back to strategic? And we have what is emerging for us as clarity. So we're using 4 words that we think name and frame what our priorities are. Number 1, gospeling the kingdom in word and deed. We're kind of making that word up. Other people have used it, but gospeling is a word we're going to make some hay out of. And then cultivating communities and life and mission. So helping our churches and pastors and leaders get clear on the gospel and what it looks like, and then cultivating that in a community sense for life and mission. And in the middle of that, developing leaders in faith and their own practice. And then the less sexy one, but the necessary one, is sustaining systems in operations and governance, because we have to be the systems people at the regional level. We can't just do things one-off. We have to think at the multiplication exponential level. So that's kind of the back office piece of that. But if that works, then it scales. And then our work is to weave all 4 of those together into a fabric that is sustainable, applicable, and tells a greater story.
Wow. And you have to have so many people and so many different locations that you weave into that. And as you're thinking, man, that's a ton. That is absolutely a ton. I love it though. And I
Well,
think,
hopefully God provides all the threads that weave together. So
I think you will, man. I think that you guys have it nailed. Man, that's so cool too to hear, even what you just said there of like, man, we kind of had to take a break and say all of our strategic planning, everything that we're working on, let's stop and see if this is what the world needs right now, is what I heard from you, like this is full steam ahead. This is what we're going in. Like the last 3 years, the world had a reset. And so to hear that you guys are kind of stopping and saying, what does the world need now? What does our team need now? How are we going to be the most effective people? That's tremendous to hear, Howard. That's absolutely awesome, man. Love to hear it. I can tell you've been working, man. That's awesome. Something's going on. Yeah, that's right.
Yep.
That's right. Something's happening on the East Coast. I love it, man. So tell me a little bit about, let's transition a little bit talking about SpaceTogether and our platform. How did you hear about us? How did you first hear about SpaceTogether?
Well, Paul Lassard and Frederick Wall, covenant leaders, knocked on our door and said, hey, we're talking with a covenant church planter out here in Colorado who's creating a platform that's kind of like Airbnb for churches, and began to talk about the haves and the have-nots and the possibility of creating a space where churches with resources could make them available to churches that were looking for resources, and the mutual benefit of that could be another way of weaving opportunities together for the kingdom. So we've been in conversation with you over the last couple of years while the pandemic has wound through, and we've been figuring out how do we tee up our churches, particularly in these urban centers where there's so much of a diversity of space and no space and cost for that, to take advantage of the platform while you work on the back end of making sure it works. So
that's right. Yeah, that's right. No, that's great, man. That's awesome. What was your first impression as soon as you heard all that this was this way of people taking the resources that they have and then using them to expand their reach in their community, generate impact, as well as a non-traditional revenue stream? What were your thoughts when you started hearing this?
Yeah, and I mean, I've used VRBO and Airbnb personally for years. So all of a sudden, when the kernel of the idea was, what if we took that concept but applied it to the nonprofit sector, specifically churches, I all of a sudden said, oh, I can see. I've got 60 church plants. Most of them don't have a building yet, who in the pandemic were, many of them, thrown out of public schools because they said, we can't have church groups meeting in here. So they're
right. Yeah.
As they come back, they're going to be looking for spaces again. And I've got some churches with remarkable facilities, but they're probably not maximized on any given day or weekend. And they could potentially partner with churches that would fulfill multiple aspirations, and partnerships is what we're all about. So it was like, absolutely. Oh, you've just taken a concept that we understand and just tweaked it and applied it in a sector that doesn't have enough representation. And if it goes big.
Yeah.
And I said, wow, if we could be a part of that, that would be the answer to many prayers.
That's awesome, man. That is absolutely, and you nailed it too, man. You got that pretty quick. I can promise I have not spent a ton of time debriefing or briefing Howard on how all this works, man. He's nailed it. That's awesome. That's absolutely awesome, man. Well, and I'll also say this, we have in between 10 and 40 people sign up every day on the platform, and out at 14-to-1 renter to provider ratio. So the demand on the platform is absolutely ridiculous. I mean, we definitely need spaces and people that are willing to open up their doors, and the thing is, prior to the pandemic, if I'm just being totally honest, and I've shared this story a bunch of times at a lot of different places, we almost went completely away from working with churches. And the reason behind that was a lot of the pastors that we were working with were just really difficult to work with. I mean, and it caused and Howard's laughing. I mean, it caused a lot of different issues. And, I'm not saying that to say that pastors are in any way bad people, but typically we look at our church as this idol of like, this is my building. Yeah. This is my church. And I'm not saying that that's necessarily even a bad thing, but that's something that we kind of were having to overcome while we're educating people on the ability that they had to really leverage their resources for more impact, not just revenue generation, but for more impact, And during the pandemic, whenever everything kind of hit, we knew that we were going to have to get hyper focused, that we were going to have to get laser focused on what we do. And the truth is that if a gym signs up on my platform, there is a massive diversification of use. There's a lot of different industries that can use a room that has mats a sound system, and mirrors, right? Like so
Yeah.
many different industries in the fitness vertical could use that. However, it's somewhat limited to that vertical, right? You know, if a cafe signs up, they have this huge commercial kitchen and it has all these different things they can do. There's not a lot of taekwondo gyms that are going to want to rent that kitchen. You know what I mean? There's not a lot of people that are going to want to host a presentation in that kitchen. So even though there's still massive diversification of use as far as what types of industries can use that space, whenever churches signed up, 35% of them have full gymnasiums, 65% of them have commercial kitchens. They all have fully up to code childcare facilities. They all have offices, and they all have at least one auditorium. The majority of them are going to have big empty parking lots and fields that are in the center of town. And so I just say that you know, the churches that are looking at this option, everything that you just said about the utility and all the things that can be kind of driven through this. The other thing is that we're just sitting on a gold mine of resources. So whenever one of the churches in the East Coast signs up on SpaceTogether, there's potentially 6 different locations that all sign up at the same time that address completely different needs in the community, you know, and have the ability to drive in so many different unique expressions of what's going on in that community. And so it absolutely does, you know, not only is it just a good way for us to use these buildings that we have, but we can answer the needs of a ton of the question or the ton of the things that our communities actually need by activating these spaces, you know. Absolutely. Well, man, so just kind of continue this on, you know, our mission is to provide a non-traditional revenue stream through community impact. What about our mission do you feel will be the biggest hesitation to the members of the covenant?
Well, I think the hesitation might be who might use our building. They're not used to it. So the idea of sharing and partnering is great, but all of a sudden, when you're used to it just being yours, there is a management factor and a risk factor to that, and that's about getting out into the community and figuring it out. So I think it's just that uncertainty of how will it go. And if we enter into a licensing agreement, you know, I mean, it may look good on the front end, but it may have some challenges. Anything like that has challenges.
Exactly.
And I think that's just a part of, they may see the obstacles more than the opportunities. And they've not been looking at an underutilized asset from either an economic perspective or a community perspective enough to say, but if we partner well, there could be multiple positives. But they may need some help thinking through that, not just on the revenue side, but on the collaborative pieces of meeting people in your community and seeing good things come.
Absolutely, man. That's awesome. And you know, just to speak a little bit to that too, you know, on SpaceTogether's platform, and this is a question that especially a lot of churches that we hear, you know, how do we keep this safe? You know, the first thing is, you know, we're not going to push you guys to post your space to the platform first. That's not our goal. Our goal first is for you guys to go through a training program that we have, where you're going to have a bunch of peers, a bunch of people that are in different industries, people that are in different denominations, part of different networks. They're all going through this training as well. And we want to get you guys to the place where you have the proper infrastructure first, right? Like let's forget about just, you know, posting your space and putting it out there. Before you do that, let's make sure you guys have the proper documentation, that you have the right security protocols, that you have the right security infrastructure so that we actually can control a lot of that. And then secondly, at SpaceTogether's platform, we have this lead manager process where when a lead comes in, this person is going to be verified. They're going to give us all their social verifications. They're going to make sure their identity is verified, that their bank account is verified. We're going to make sure that they are who they say they are. Then they're also going to have to list the intent of use for the space. This is why I'm using this building. This is all I'm trying to do. Then they're going to tell you exactly when they need it and what their budget is. You're going to get all of that information before you ever even speak to this person. And even then, once you see their application, you can go in and counter every part of that. Ask for more information, ask them to change their times, ask them to change their budget before you say yes to anything. And after you say yes to them, all that you're agreeing to give them at that point is a video tour of your space to just make sure that it works. And then from there, we're going to take care of all the processes to make sure that's both simple and safe. But I would have to echo, though, Howard, you know, when we do our first class, we really don't talk about anything that has to do with sharing space. We stop and we say, everybody that does this is doing this for one of two reasons. You're either doing this for impact or you're doing this for cash. And the truth is that we're all on that spectrum somewhere. So the first thing that we're going to do with you guys is we're going to sit down and we're going to say, hey guys, why are you doing this? And let's build an infrastructure around that. So absolutely, I totally agree with you there. And I think that's something that we can help move forward with, both the help of the training and our platform. So absolutely. I think you're hitting the nail on the head there. What are your thoughts on the future of church financing? Do you feel that we will continue to be funded primarily through tithes and offerings, or is there going to be kind of in this new world that we're sort of talking about that your team's addressing? Obviously, I think donations are such a vital and important to your partnership and all those things. I think it'd be absolutely crazy to have a model where we totally go away from that. But what are your thoughts, Howard? Do you feel that the new church in the coming years is going to have, multiple revenue streams, or is that something that you guys are seeing in the covenant?
Well, if we were actually talking about tithes, we'd be in a different place, wouldn't we, Pastor?
Amen. Yeah.
Tithe to be 10%.
Yeah.
But if we just look at revenue trends and the diversity of where we're going, the answer is yes, some will be able to sustain through generous actual percentage giving and offering. Others will be challenged to do that because they're serving in a different marginalized community. And so I think the future is increasingly looking at a diversity of revenue streams that are about community development, as well as teaching generosity and about maximizing facility partnerships. It's all that. When we're planting in particularly urban and socially challenged spaces, we're looking at multiple streams there. Yeah. Because even if people are generous and give a high percentage of their own income, you look at that on a per person basis, it's not adequate to sustain the ministry model that would really advance the ministry of the church and the gospeling of the kingdom adequately. So the more the merrier. You kind of take Mark Diamaz's perspective and realize, yeah, we need to think creatively and adaptively on a variety of revenue streams. And that also provides some safety, because if you have a variance in one, you might be able to supplement that. But if you only have one stream and something happens to that, you're in a predicament that you may not have prepared for. So we're looking to all of that as a part of our futuring together.
Yeah, and I can give a shameless plug there for my boy Mark too. I'm actually having a conversation with him next week. We're going to do some stuff together. But if you guys have not read, is it the Coming Revolution in Church Economics, I believe?
It is.
He's got it on his desk. Let's go. Love it. Yeah.
See right there. You didn't even tell me about that.
Yeah.
There it is right there. Yeah.
There you go. That's awesome. I was actually in Orlando with him, and he knew that I had some big national contracts and everything, but he didn't know who they were with or anything. And he stood up and he talked about how the covenant was the most progressive, and not in any sort of bad way. He was saying, as far as forward thinking, progressive, cared about their people, stood up for the right things. And he said, those guys are my absolute heroes. And I was like, man, did you know that was my very first national, those are my guys, So I told Paul that. He was pretty tickled about it as well. But definitely, if you guys have not read that book, I could not encourage it more. Every pastor should have a copy of that. So thankful that you're working through that. In a perfect world, what does the partnership with SpaceTogether do for the East Coast Conference?
In a perfect world, you're like an arm that we attach to that. Again, you create a living room for connections between people who might not otherwise meet, on the haves and the have-nots, and the opportunities to enhance congregational life and mission. So what we might have aspired to do with an idea, you're actually creating a mechanism through the platform that allows all of us to collaborate, and that can meet multiple needs. So
absolutely,
that's a good thing. Like, you're the net that the fisherman throws out to then catch the fish. Otherwise, it's just me standing over the bow looking in the water going, I wish some would jump in the boat. You say, hey, let's use this tool.
Yep. Yeah, absolutely. And Howard, for us, and a lot of people know this story, but this all got started just because we had to find a building and we didn't have any time to do it. And then we went through this ridiculous process when I was like, why can't I just share with people? I only need a few hours a week. Why can't we just share with people in our community? And then once we went through that crazy process and all of the leases and remodeling and fundraising and everything, we were never there. 2 services, band practice, youth group, and the rest of the time, this building that was like 90% of my budget and all of my stress was a really expensive storage unit. And that's when we said, again, there's got to be some sort of commercial Airbnb where we can list this thing. And again, we could not find it. So we took really good pictures of our space with our cell phones and we posted it to Craigslist. And it was the sketchiest thing of all time. I mean, it was absolutely wild, the amount of stuff that we dealt with and all the people that we met. But within 3 months, we had 65% of our overhead covered by people using our facility when we weren't there. And again, it was wildly sketchy, but that alone, the ability to generate that revenue was not why we started SpaceTogether. The reason we started SpaceTogether was because as a pastor, and I don't get to say this all the time when we're talking to our other clients and everything, I usually keep this more to myself, but in our congregation, like in our group of people, the 150, 200 people, whatever we had, that little group of folks, man, like it changed everything. Because on our off nights, they could drive by our little building and it was full of people. The parking lot was full and we weren't having a service. We were impacting our community when we weren't even using our building. And then on top of that, when I stood up and I got to speak to our community, everyone knew two things. When I was pushing them or challenging them to do something in the community, it wasn't because our church needed to have more impact. It wasn't that we wanted our names out there as look at what this church is doing so that we could tell everybody, you should come be a part of our church because look what we do in the community. We already had that covered. We were impacting so many people on so many levels. They knew that. And then obviously on the flip side, when we got up and we were taking offerings or we were raising capital to go do something, everyone knew it wasn't because we needed their money to cover this or that. It was because we were genuinely felt that the Lord was leading us to challenge them in a certain direction. And the culture change is why I was like, somebody's got to be doing this. Somebody has got to have this. And so I would just say, man, it changed everything for us. Not only was it awesome to have, over 60% of my overhead covered, by something that was non-traditional. That's tremendous. I think all of us can agree that gives you a lot of utility in what you can actually do. But what we were able to do in our community, that was really the thing. That was really the thing that was like, we've got to start this, And it is true. I mean, how many people, would not have been able to get started or wouldn't have been able to sustain themselves if we wouldn't have opened our doors that way. So, man, that's exciting to hear you say. And I can kind of wrap this up a little bit as well. What would you want the members of the East Coast Conference to know about the partnership with SpaceTogether?
Well, I want them to know that it's ministry driven, that it comes from a pastor's frustration and vision that, hey, this doesn't have to be so hard, right? I mean, there's a model, there's an economic reality. All the beyond the details is this kingdom opportunity that is built on overcoming frustration that we all experience from time to time. That's the beautiful part of it. Somebody said necessity is the mother of invention, right? But the father of invention is persistence. A lot of people see things as obstacles, but somebody gets together and says, we're going to use this limitation as a way to innovate. And then not just to do it for yourself, but to realize, hey, we could offer a tool that could generate tremendous opportunity on multiple levels and meet needs. And to be good stewards of buildings anyway in the world. If you're looking at ecology, if you're looking at economy, again, you're right, a 24/7 storage space, what good is that when it's empty 6 days a week? So to maximize, you're actually exercising hospitality, which is a profound biblical value as well, and breaking down barriers. So I want us to think that we could do that too. And that would all be on the value added side of opportunity.
Awesome, man. Love it. Absolutely love it. And, you guys were our first big national client. So you guys have all sorts of discounts. So you guys, the first thing that we'd want you to go through, and after you watch this video, if you're like, man, we really want to get involved, Lawn at SpaceTogether, LAN at SpaceTogether. She's going to take care of everything you guys need, answer any questions. The first step in this process is we want to get you, first of all, we want to answer any questions that you have. If there's anything you want to know before you get started, that's great. Secondly, we want to get you guys signed up for our training program. Again, it's really cool. We have a ton of people from a bunch of different industries that are a part of it. People from the covenant will be in it. People in other denominations and other networks will be in it. People that don't even do anything with churches are in it. And it's a really cool experience to just talk about sharing our buildings. But then from there, for people that are a part of the covenant, you guys get SpaceTogether for $100 a year. Our average license agreement is $20,000 a year for 8 hours of weekly use. And it's going to cost you $100 a year to get on the platform. I can guarantee you this. No one else has Space Together for $100 a year, nor will anybody else. But I got to ask Paul and Frederick a ton of questions in exchange for that low rate. So
They found you when you were very hungry.
yes, they did. Yeah. And I told them, I was like, look, you guys are the first ones. You're going to get a killer deal, but I'm going to find out about how denominations work. I'm going to quiz you guys pretty tough. So it was a fair exchange. But all that to say, it's very affordable. I think all of you can agree, for the training and signing up, it's going to cost you $600. From then on, it's going to cost you $100 a year. I think that's a pretty good deal. So anyways, guys, please do, if you watched this and thought it was awesome, please do reach out to Lon at SpaceTogether, LAN at SpaceTogether.com. If you'd like to reach out to Howard, I'm sure he can direct you to us to answer any questions that you guys have. And again, Howard, thank you so much for taking the time to hang out with us and answer questions and have this interview, man. I really do appreciate that.
Thanks, Justin. We pray God's blessing on you and Space Together and all who partner with you.
Amen. I look forward to seeing you soon, my friend.
Thanks. Yeah.
Thanks for watching this episode of Space Together. I'm sure you found it really informative, engaging, and rewarding. So join us at spacetogether.com today and begin generating revenue by impacting the community around you.